everyone. For those who are new to my channel, I'm Kat. I'm a wife, a homeschool mom, and an avid reader. For those who are coming back, welcome back. First, I want to start this video with saying Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. As a fellow mother, I want to say that you're doing a great job, even when it doesn't feel that way. You love your children every day to the best of your ability. You are seen. As a daughter, I want to say thank you for doing the hard work every day in the little and the big ways. You are loved so much, and life would not be the same without you. Now, how about a little story time and a tiny peek into how I know that my previous statements are true. As a disclaimer right here, right now, I am going to cry. There is no probably about it. This is a story that is my life. Sorry, hair bow's getting in the way. It is my story. And it's raw and can be hard. But again, this is just part of it. And so I am going to divide this into chapters because I don't know exactly how long it's going to be or if anyone is even really all that interested. So I will have chapter divided out for some encouragement for moms and daughters at the end. So, I was born to my mother, Betty Jane. She was a fierce mama, but she wasn't perfect. In fact, many times she felt like an utter failure to the point that I don't know if she really ever felt that she was good enough. And as her daughter, I made life tough. I was very strong-willed and independent, and I have days where I wonder where my child gets it. I just need to look in the mirror. I was so strong-willed that my mother claimed that James Dobson had to write the new Strong-Willed Child in response to me. The second edition was written before I was born. So it wasn't written for me or in response to me, but that was the joke in our house. As an adult, I know that I broke her heart over and over and over again. But also, as a mature adult, I know that I have had at least moments that I've made her proud. Thinking of my mother, the earliest memory I have is right around, I believe, my 5th birthday. The Little Mermaid was my obsession. Especially that year, whether it was 5 or maybe even 6. But it came out in 1989, and I just loved Ariel and wanted everything to do with Ariel. I wanted to be a mermaid, all that fun stuff. And this love of Ariel does continue throughout my life. Into even my rebellious years as an adult. Not quite so much because I have that headstrong daughter who is very much like Ariel. Now, my mother was a great, wonderful cake decorator, and she was very, very creative. So, she did what moms do, especially at that time, and she made me an Ariel cake. After I'd blown out the candles, she did what most people do when they cut up a cake. They ask the birthday person um, what piece they want. In my innocent 5-year-old self, I didn't realize that she meant, do I want like a corner piece? Do I want a side piece? Do I want an inside piece with none, where I got, that it wasn't that she was asking me. I very, very proudly looked at this woman and I went, I want Ariel's head. I wanted Ariel's head on a platter. Granted, this platter was probably a 6-inch platter, but I totally can see where Herod's wife and Herod got to where they're at. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Not really. I doubt that. But I can relate just a little bit. That was the very center of the cake. And my mother, the loving, wonderful, patient soul she was, looked at me and goes, yes, you can have that piece, but not right now. And so I'm sure that I threw a hissy fit or something, grumbled, complained at the very least, but I don't remember that part. And I don't even remember what piece I eventually chose for the for the cake. I do remember the next morning. And this is why I'm pretty sure that I was 5 and not 6, because I have a little brother who's 3 years younger than me. And he was a toddler at this point. Couldn't reach the counter. And he pushed his little chair up to the counter so that he could have a piece of cake the next morning. Now, where was I in all of this? I have no idea. Well, I do know. I was next to him during all of this. Did I prompt him in my big sisterly love and, let's go get a piece of cake for breakfast, the sibling thing to do. And so generous of me, the birthday girl, to share my birthday cake. Well, he pushes his little chair up there, climbs up there, grabs hold of that platter or container, whatever it was in, and then is a toddler and a little clumsy, and the entire pan hits the floor, frosting side down. I was heartbroken. Here is my birthday cake on the floor, frosting side down, and I did not get Ariel's face. But in swooped my mother, a knight in not so shiny armor, because who really wants a knight with untested armor? She grabs a knife and very, very carefully scrapes Ariel off the floor and plopped it on a plate so that she could make my morning. Was it perfect? No. Did it make me happy in that moment? Most definitely. And that was my mother, always trying to make sure that we were provided for, to make sure that we were happy, even if it meant that she sacrificed something. And as a child, I didn't see this. As a young adult, I didn't understand this. but as a mother myself, I now can sympathize with her. As I said, my mother wasn't perfect, and she made mistakes. When I was in second grade, she and my father were both arrested. The ins and outs of why are another story for another day. But we were placed in foster care. I remember during that time away from us, or away from them, our family being separated, that we went through 3 households. The first was just a weekend or a week, maybe even just a couple days, I'm not sure. But my siblings and I were separated from each other. And I really don't remember much about this house. I do remember that this foster mom took time out of her busyness, of her plans, and loved me in that moment. I had longer hair, not as long as it is now, but it was on the longer side. And she sat there and picked out every nit and every bug from my lice-ridden head. And she lovingly brushed my hair and styled it so that it didn't look like a rat's nest every day that I was with her. And I also remember that each night, there she was, standing in the doorway, as I read the prayer that she had hanging on the wall. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. This foster mom probably doesn't, I don't know who she is. She probably doesn't even remember me. I was in and out, and she was one of those emergency respite foster moms. She had kids in and out of her house all the time. But seeing that love and that kindness that she gave to me, a stranger, was so special to me. And there's no way I could ever thank her now. But I can live my life towards strangers, towards those who are unwanted or momentarily unloved or neglected, and love them in a similar way. And after my short time with her, I was reunited with my younger brother and sister at my aunt's house. My aunt and uncle sacrificed so much to bring in 3 children, my sister being 3, I was 8, into their home with their 4 own children. My brother is in between us. He would have been about 5. And they already had 4 children of their own. Their youngest was about 5, and their oldest was in middle school or high school. I don't remember exactly. But he was quite a bit older than the rest of us. And they doubled their house size in one fell swoop, opening their home to us. As a child, I had no idea how big of a sacrifice this would have been. As a mother now, I know it's huge. Doubling the number of children in your house, or even almost doubling it, you now have 7 instead of 4 children to take care of, to keep alive, to feed, to keep a house over. And then you have the added dishes of added mouths, more cleaning because you now have more feet coming in and out of the house, more laundry, all of this just overnight. That's not including the things that they had, the changes they had to make to their household. But I sit there and look at my aunt. She was sending her youngest off to preschool or off to kindergarten the next year. She was done with the toddler age. She was done with preschool. And she opened her house to 3 kids who needed her. All because they were family by no choice of their own. And she started the potty training and the accidents in the middle of the night during potty training or whatever else. Now she needs another babysitter because she can't just send all the kids off to school. And I look at that and I think, wow, there's no way at this point in my life that that's not true. I would probably do it if my sister needed me to. But at the same time, it would take a lot of consideration on my part. It's a big sacrifice to do that. I don't remember a whole lot of my time there. So much of my younger years I've kind of blocked out, just because it's so hard for me to remember the good times without having to deal with the hard times that came later on. And at my aunt's house, things were good that I remember anyway. I remember being surrounded by my family. We had my grandmother and my other aunt that weren't far away. We had cousin days where we had all of the cousins together. We did so much that was fun. I don't really remember many bad times. I know that they were there, but looking back, at least the parts that I remember the good times. I remember the KFC Sunday lunches after church, along with a mashed potato fight that happened one Sunday that all of us decided all of a sudden that we didn't want mashed potatoes that day. But we had put them on our plate before we decided that we didn't want mashed potatoes. And my aunt and uncle told us that we couldn't leave the table until we had cleared our plates. So we found a really fun way of clearing our plates. Sorry, Aunt Dottie. I don't remember if you made us clean up the ensuing mess that happened from our mashed potato food fight. But boy, do I remember having to sit at that table that week and write lines about not throwing mashed potatoes on Sunday lunch. I remember dyeing Easter eggs in anticipation of finding them, only to wake up to find that it had rained that Easter. And all of us kids are piled in the living room while my aunt and uncle hastily hide Easter eggs in the den and the dining room. And I remember finding on the wall, my aunt had this mug display. I don't even remember what was special about these mugs, if there even was something special about them. But I remember these mugs and looking up and finding an egg Well, being an 8-year-old, I couldn't reach it. And so I asked one of my taller cousins, um, who are a year to 5, 6 years, 7 years older than I am, um, to help me out. And that cousin helped me out and got that egg. But he decided to put that egg in his Easter basket. But at the end of the egg hunt, when we counted out our eggs to find out who had won the Easter egg contest, because heaven forbid anything with 7 children not include some sort of contest. My aunt added 1 to my count and subtracted 1 from the offending cousin. And as a child, I didn't see how hard and how much sacrifice my aunt had to make to be able to balance work, housework, child rearing, and keeping her cool in front of us. I also didn't see her advocation for what was best for all 7 of the children under her roof, even when it did mean a sacrifice on her part. So, Aunt Dottie, if you're watching this, thank you so much for all that you did for us. There is no way that any of us would have had that same foundation that we had you not been there for us at that time. After I finished my 3rd grade school year, we were moved to another foster family that didn't have other children. In this new home, I remember 2 goofy dogs and 2 very temperamental cats. I also remember experiencing for the first time extreme sorrow over someone else's punishment. As an adult and a parent, I now know that in that case, the punishment fit the crime. And also, as an adult, I've looked back and I can see how that particular lesson affected me and the how important discipline was. It no longer, at that time, I kind of just thought that when I got grounded or when I got spanked or when I was put in timeout, that it was just the adults punishing me and that they were being mean. But it was at this point I can look back and I know that this was when I first started to make that connection, that discipline was not the same as punishment, and that discipline was done out of love. This also was when I discovered my love of reading, and eventually would lead me here. One of the teachers in the school that I was attending did a reading challenge with her students. I don't remember if it was like read across the world, read across America. I don't know. It was one of these challenges though, and you read X number of books and you got certain prizes. In addition to Pizza Hut's Book It program. Read 10 pizzas, get a personal size pizza. I mean, read 10 books. Don't read the pizza, read the book. 10 books got you a free personal pizza. But this was when that love of reading really became kindled. And it no longer was just about schoolwork. It was no longer a chore that I had to do to get to the next step. And this foster mom took me to the library probably more often than I probably had to go. She also let me borrow. She had a whole shelf of children's books and borrowed books from her school's library. Um, all of this just to help feed that desire for reading and that desire for this challenge. It's also when a new Disney princess obsession began. At this time, Pocahontas had come to theaters. And for me, Pocahontas was this character that looked similar to me. Um, she had the dark hair that was longer, and that's all I wanted. I wanted my hair to be down to my butt so it could blow in the wind like Pocahontas's did, because cartoon hair, doesn't get tangled. Um, yeah, that dream, while I grow my hair out longer, that dream of it blowing in the wind did not stick around. Um, but my foster mom did her best for us. And one of the things was for my birthday, she made me a Pocahontas cake. She was not a cake decorator like my mother was, but she knew how to use scissors. And so she got some cardboard Pocahontas cutouts and made me a cake from that. And it was one that allowed me to feel seen and loved, even though that um, that skill wasn't there. She wasn't able to, go to the store and pull out all of her baking stuff. A box cake with Pocahontas cutouts was her best. And she did that and showed me she loved me through that. Shortly after this birthday, we ended up back in my mother's care. And this was an adjustment for all of us. My mother got a small taste during this time of what it meant to be a single mother. It was a difficult time for her and an adjustment for us. We now were in a single parent family, even though it was temporary, and we still saw my father at this time. It was a very different setup for us. We no longer were in a two-parent household as we had been through our whole lives at this point. But through this, I think my mother was able to see how strong she had become through some of her trials, and for probably the first time found that she could stand on her own 2 feet and she didn't have to have that male partner. Did she still want him? Most definitely. But for the first time, she learned kind of how to pay bills and take care of her children without having someone to rely on 24/7. During this time and until we were reunited with my father, I don't really remember a lot of stress in the home. I remember feeling kind of that early teenage angst because my name was spelled weird. I couldn't find my name on keychains or pencils, and I wanted to change the spelling of my name. I remember being teased and bullied by someone at school, but we were great friends out of school. I remember struggling with moving from one school district to another and having to make friends all over again. I remember those times of not wanting to do the dishes, not wanting to do chores, but hearing my mother tell us about what happened when she didn't do chores correctly and wanting to be a little bit thankful for what we did have or how she parented differently. Um, During this time, we got a bird. And I found I do not like birds in the house. They are fine outside and wild, but I do not want one caged in my house. Thank you. They make a mess, and they are gross. Um, I do remember my mother and her phone calls constantly to the management because we were in an apartment complex, and when a certain group of neighbors moved in and then out, a cockroach infestation moved in with them but never left. And just trying those moments of her being on the phone for what seemed like hours, whether it was or not, I don't know, of saying, hey, we need someone to come in and exterminate this. Okay, that exterminator didn't work. What else can we do? And it just being this battle, um, ongoing and ongoing and ongoing. And shortly after all of this happened, I think that was like the biggest stress that we had, or those stupid cockroaches. But after all of this, we get reunited with my father. And we are all 5 living under a roof together again. And then came my early teen years. These years were fraught with normal teenage drama and hormones, along with plenty of other problems that most teenagers don't have to deal with, including being kidnapped. Again, I saw my mother make a huge sacrifice during this time, although I wouldn't know how big of a sacrifice it was until after the situation was dealt with. Long story short, my father threatened my mother with never seeing us again if she didn't come with him when he left. And so she sacrificed her safety, both physical safety and emotional safety, for her children. She helped pack up a van and a U-Haul and left everything else behind so that she didn't lose her kids, so that she could be there to protect them. Eventually, we were rescued, and my father was arrested. What we didn't know at this time was the damage that was done. Doctors believe, and we find this out later on, that doctors believe that during the stress of the situation, my mother had her first heart attack that went unnoticed and would be untreated for 3 years. Again, after all of this, through this situation, and as we're getting set up in a new place with different friends around us, I watched my mother sacrifice. She worked as hard as she could and as many hours as she could at jobs that she could get, which was made harder by her past. She sacrificed her pride and accepted food stamps, state housing, and church handouts so that we had a roof over our heads, clothes on our backs, and food in our tummies. There weren't a lot of extras in this time, but she still did what she could. Christmases were small, but there was always gifts under the tree. There was always a tree. Birthdays were quiet. It was just the 4 of us. But there was always a cake, and there was always a gift. And not only that, but I remember her sacrificing even for those outside of our home. She always teased that she could cook only for an army. She only knew how to cook for an army. And so that's what she did many nights. Many nights she would cook us a meal, and it would be more than the 4 of us could eat in a week. And so she would plate it up and take it up to the small little police station, and that they had 2 officers on duty and the deputy, and would feed them probably 2 or 3 nights a week. And during this time, she sacrificed more and more so that we were happy and cared for. Eventually, all the stress of being a single mom and trying to take care of 3 almost teenagers, 2 of us were teenagers, 1 was bordering that. All of that stress and the sacrifice caught up with her. During my junior year, she went to the hospital for the first time. She was there for almost 2 weeks. And due to the relationships that she built at work, one of her coworkers kept us at her house. And this coworker not only housed us, but she showed us love. She made sure that we had food and plenty to eat. There were days before this and there would be days after this, that the only meal that I might have during a day was the school free lunch, just because we couldn't afford anything else. But during these 2 weeks, I had plenty to eat. We had clean clothes. I swear she would have cleaned our clothes with us still wearing them if she could have. And she also gave us a shoulder to cry on when we needed it, or an ear to listen when we needed to talk, or even just a quiet presence when we needed that stillness. Eventually, my mother does come home, or did come home, but continued to struggle with her health. For a year and a half, we watched her fight for every heartbeat, for every breath, every single day. During this time, she was reunited with her oldest daughter, whom they had been estranged from due to her father's protecting her. But during this year and a half, they were able to build a relationship again. And through all of this, she still continued to sacrifice. There wasn't always enough money for the essentials like food and medicine, much less Christmas and birthdays, sports, class rings, graduation, prom. But somehow, she managed to make it all work. With help from my sister, with help from the church, with help from kind souls in that little town who knew us and loved us. And she continued like this until one morning her body gave out. The day after I graduated, I drove my mother to the emergency room, where she was admitted for another week. This time, the doctors didn't have hope to give. They told her that she had 3 to 6 months left and that it was time to get her affairs in order. Again, she came home and continued to sacrifice, not telling us what was going on. We knew she had heart problems, but not telling us how severe things were. She tried to take all the medicines and follow all the advice the doctors gave, hoping it was enough, that it would be enough to get her through for more years. What her goal was, I don't know. Almost 5 years to the day from when I drove her to the emergency room. She got up, went to work, and collapsed. For the entire ambulance ride, which was about 30 minutes, the EMTs tried life-saving measures like CPR, knowing that she had 3 kids at home who needed her. At the hospital, the nurses and the doctors did everything they could to revive her because they too knew that she had 3 kids at home who needed her. And that was the day that I lost my mother. I lost the steady foundation I had built my life on. My grandmother and aunts came out. We hadn't seen them in years, but still, they came to do the unthinkable, to bury their daughter, to bury their little sister, and try to comfort us as we buried our mother. For a short time, my aunts let me try to keep my little broken family together. They tried to let us stick out the semester. But it soon became evident that that was too much of a sacrifice to ask. It was too much for me. It was too stressful, and it wasn't the way they wanted to advocate for their nieces and nephew. So they flew my younger brother and sister out to California, where they lived, where my grandmother lived, where my older sister lived. All of our family was there. But I, in my strong-willed stubbornness, said I was staying where I was. I may have been anchorless, rudderless, and lost without any hope, but I didn't want that change. So one of my friends' families let me stay with them for a while. But as much as they wanted and tried to help me, I was too stuck I was too deep in a dark pit, and I didn't want their help. Eventually, I had a huge decision to make. What was I going to do? My mom's coworker, who took care of us when she was in the hospital, laid my choices out for me very clearly. I could continue struggling where I was at. I could move to California, where my siblings were, or I could move to South Carolina and live with her daughter's family. And I knew in that moment that I couldn't stay where I was. I was drowning in bitterness and in hurt. And because of the amount of hurt and bitterness, I couldn't go to California with my siblings. I was scared that I was going to drown them and pull them under, trying to save myself. Which left one choice. So, on Friday, May 13th, I boarded a plane with 3 suitcases and went to a place I had never been, to a place where I only knew 2 people very minutely. I had only met them once, and it was only the daughter and it was only my mom's coworker's daughter and her daughter. I had never met the father of this family. But they were my only hope that I could come out of that pit and get the help I needed. At this time, I also realized that I had been riding on the coattails of my mother's faith. I had grown up in the church. I could talk the talk. I could look like I walked the walk. But I had never truly put my faith in God at that point. But boy, was I good at hiding behind that mask. So good that through the years, I had pastors and youth pastors thinking that I was right with God. Once I moved out here to South Carolina, I started to learn the hard work of trusting others and ultimately trusting God. I signed a contract that laid out the expectations of me to work, to go to college, to get counseling help. and to help the family I was living with. During this time, that first summer was a whirlwind of spiritual growth. I couldn't get enough. It also had a moment that I experienced that I never thought would have been possible. Due to all the sacrifices my mother made for us, she was very, extremely jealous of the title mom. And would be very upset if I teasingly called anyone else mom. My first weekend in South Carolina, I went to lunch with the person I was staying with and my mother's coworker's daughter. At this lunch, I agreed to continue living where I was for the summer, and other details were being worked out, like where I was working for the summer, who I was going to see for counseling, how I was going to keep my contract, keep the requirements of my contract. While at this lunch, I felt my mother's arms wrap around me and give me a hug. And as that hug ended, my mother's coworker's daughter wrapped her arm around me and gave me a side hug. It was at this moment that a great peace washed over me, and I felt that my mother was entrusting me to this other mom and giving me permission to accept the gift that was given, that was being presented in front of me. At the end of this summer, at the end of that summer, I moved in with this mom and her family. They became my family and fully embraced me as their own. I, an adult in the eyes of the law, was brought under the umbrella of their protection. And they would continue to show me what sacrifice meant, but also how to love unconditionally. My mother did a great job of showing me what unconditional love looked like. But because of her constant sacrifice, I missed the lesson of how to love unconditionally myself. Now, since it is Mother's Day, I'm going to save my daddy's story for later. But Mama, she opened her arms to me and sacrificed a more traditional timeline of parenting to include me in their family. She accepted this bitter, angry, hurting, legally adult child into her home. She sacrificed the peace that they had right then to show me what peace really was. She didn't have to make the sacrifices that she did, and yet she did. She chose to be a mom to me, to show me how to be the mom I am today. She spent many nights sleepless, praying for me, praying over me. She spent many, many hours giving me advice, even when I didn't want to hear it. And she's given me so much. And all because she opened her arms to someone she didn't have to. For 18 years, I was my mother's daughter. Now, I have been my mama's daughter for 18 years. I can look back at the many talks we had, mostly while she was in the bathtub, and I can see that she poured out so much love for me. We've had many road trips together, but more road trips trying to get to each other. And many, many phone calls, texts, messages of me begging for advice of how to raise her granddaughter. That sometimes I didn't apply right away, and when I finally get past my stubbornness, I listen to that advice. And Mama, you haven't been wrong yet. I couldn't have made it to this point without you. And I will never be able to repay you for your sacrifices. But I will strive to be the best mom I can in your honor. Oh, this is who, when I say I'm going home, this is where I'm going. This is my family, and her mom welcomed me into as her granddaughter just as readily as Mama and Daddy accepted me as their daughter. And Papa, oh, Papa, he was the same. I became theirs just as much as their blood granddaughter. And in the last few years, we have been watching Mimi's Alzheimer's, her dementia, get worse and worse. And yet, I'm still hers. And it is so amazing the way that God has taken this runaway, rebellious, stubborn kid and given her opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to have a family and to learn from that family. And now, oh, I'm going to try to give a little encouragement. Moms of littles out there, I see you. I know that it is hard. I've been there. I won't say it gets easier, but it does change. Eventually, you will sleep again. Eventually, you won't need to change diapers or wipe bottoms or noses. You won't need to cut up their hot dogs into little itty bitty pieces so they don't choke. Eventually, they will become more independent and will clean up after themselves. Or so I'm told. I'm still waiting on that one. Moms out there of elementary schoolers, eventually, they will read. They will learn math. They will tie their own shoes. They might drive you crazy with their independent streaks and their dilly-dallying to get when you have a time schedule. But know that they still need you right now. It's hard to watch them grow up. and not need you quite as much, but it is so worth it. Moms of preteens and teens, I'm right there with you right now. They don't want your love in public, but they still need it in private. And that love might not look the same as it did when they were a toddler, when they were in elementary school. This love now, instead of necessarily hugs and kisses and those outward expressions of PDA, it's giving grace on a hormonal day, or just going for a drive and letting them vent. It's a little quieter. And just like we made it through those other stages, we'll make it through this one. Mamas of high schoolers, college students, kiddos getting married, having kids of their own, I'm looking to you. Keep good notes, 'cause I want them. Now, not all of you are mamas, but all of you are daughters. For those of you, daughters, with your mama still around, tell her you love her. Ask for her advice. Beg her to write those recipes down. Your favorite recipes, you're going to want those one day. Listen to those stories that she tells over and over again about you growing up, about her growing up. Thank her for all that she has sacrificed for you. And for you daughters out there, this one's the hardest. Whose mom is not around. I am so sorry. This past year, my Aunt Margaret's family had to say goodbye to her. And my Aunt Dottie had to say goodbye to her mother. This is a tough year in our house. There's a lot of brokenness. I know it's hard. Nothing can replace your mom. And unfortunately, you will never stop missing her. Even if you're lucky like me and you get a bonus mom. Time does help to make the pain less sharp, but you will always feel that loss. If you have made it this far, thank you for sticking with me through the tears to hear a part of my story. There are still more pages to write, but unlike River Song, I don't know how long my book will be. Happy Mother's Day.